Okay. All right. So now officially, welcome everyone. My name is Margarita Kuleva. I work here as an assistant professor at the Department of Professional Studies. And today we have a special guest. This is Alisa Lozhkina, who came here especially for us from California. And Alisa is an art historian, and that is your latest book, The Art of Ukraine. And if you're a member of NYU community, you can just get it in box. And otherwise, you can order it via Amazon. Sometimes you need to wait to get your own copy, but it's definitely worth.
So previously, Alisa curated major contemporary art exhibitions at leading international institutions and held senior roles within Ukraine's art infrastructure. As an artist, she works primarily with textiles, creating quilts and dolls as vessels of memory, myth, and embodied experience. Her current scholarly work focuses on the role of psychedelics in the Ukrainian art community after the collapse of Soviet Union. And another announcement that I would like to make is that I'm very grateful that this public talk is accommodated by some courses that I teach, including Soviet fashion, and I'm very glad to see the members of this class here. And as part of Soviet fashion, we talk a lot about textile, and even more, we talk about selfless labor of many female producers in Soviet and post-Soviet space. And today in her talk, Alisa will take autobiographical perspective, delivering her own story of the very contemporary art history of Ukrainian art world. So let us welcome Alisa. And the last word for now is that so the event will take approximately 90 minutes. Alisa will talk like an hour. Yeah. Do you need a reminder if you speak like 50? Yeah. Okay, I'll let you know when you speak 50 minutes. And then we reserved like 30 minutes for open discussion. And I'm pretty sure that you're going to have a lot of questions. So let's all together welcome Alisa Lozhkina. I'm very pleased to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rita, for inviting me. It was an amazing opportunity. I really admire Rita's work, and since 2022, when we met at Berkeley, I'm a huge fan and follower of both her artistic practice and her academic endeavors. So it's a pleasure. And she told me a lot about you guys and about your studies and everything. And today I decided to take a very unusual perspective for me on my own work, because usually as an art worker I am behind the scenes, and I'm so used to lecturing about other people's work, other people's accomplishments, artworks and other things, that for me it is like it sounds funny in our narcissistic age, but it is quite a challenging thing is to speak about myself. But I decided to choose myself as a case study of a wider situation that happened in Ukraine during the time when I was active there as an curator, as an art worker, as an artist. We are speaking about, roughly speaking, about 2 decades, starting from 2002 and ending in 2020, because since the pandemic, I've been living permanently, more or less, in the United States. So I will not focus on the contemporary situation so much, because I don't live in Ukraine right now, and I don't feel, to be honest, the right to speak about the situation and the pains and troubles and struggles which you probably heard a lot of, but which people who have first-hand experience probably are better suited to talk about. But there are a lot of other things in the Ukrainian art world which reflect wider tendencies in the whole region, and maybe in a way will echo with what you encounter here in the US as well. So my talk, I want to start with the way how I fell in love with contemporary art, and why did I decide to dedicate my whole career to this particular field, which never paid well, which never gave me any particular benefits other than a lot of headache and a lot of like challenging situations and emotions. But it all started, as it usually starts, from falling in love. And I fell in love. It might not look like the picture in which you might fall in love, but when I was 16, for me, when I saw this kind of stuff in a magazine that was a mainstream magazine for teenagers and young people, it was called Om. It was published in Russia, in Moscow, and I just saw those pictures and I was mind blown. I thought, like, wow, this is something cool. And I didn't really understand what it was because contemporary art was not on my radar at that time. I was like not even aware that such a thing existed. I didn't even realize that this was art. I thought it was just some sort of a fashion story maybe, or who knows what was published in that magazine. It took me several years to realize that actually this was an artwork by one of the most prominent Ukrainian artists of the 1990s, whose name is Arsen Savadov. And it's a very important work in the history of Ukrainian art because it was made in the Donbass, in one of the coal mines. It was actual coal miners whom the artist somehow managed to convince that he was making some sci-fi movie, or I don't even know how he managed to convince them to dress, because this is a very patriarchal, very masculine-oriented social group who very rarely participates in some transgressive things. But somehow it was this time, 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, everybody was like so frustrated and so confused that I think it also added to the reason why this project happened. So he just basically implemented a group of transgressive young performers into the real life of a coal mine and underground, made this project that is called Donbass Chocolate or Deep Insider. And of course, it left an impression on me of something that was different from what I was surrounded from, that post-Soviet gloomy, mundane and boring reality. And if I thought about art, it was something like, I don't know, Leonardo da Vinci maybe, or something like that. But there was no like really vibrant, some vital thing in my immediate surroundings. So in 2002, this is one of the another project of that time from the same artist. It was called Fashion on the Cemetery, and it's like quite a challenging project because he made a fashion story for a fashion magazine, but featuring real people on real funerals. So it's like controversial from the point of view of ethics, but it was very revolutionary at the time because like we, as post-Soviet people, were just introduced to this culture of fashion stories, of fashion magazines. There was no, I mean, there were fashion magazines, as Rita probably knows, in the Soviet Union, but they were very different in their vibe before the collapse of the Soviet Union. So this was also something interesting. And also you have to take it in mind that I was 16 years old. I was born in 1981. So for 16 years old, it was quite an interesting site. And in 2002, I started working in a contemporary art gallery where I finally realized that those people and those things that I really liked were not just some random stuff in the fashion magazines, but they were actually parts of contemporary art projects which were implemented into the fabric of this mainstream media, which was very popular back in the days because it was considered like a strategy for an artist to intervene into the public space through public media to spread as a word, and it really worked. I mean, I am the how to say, I don't know whether I'm a victim or a beneficiary of that process, but definitely I was influenced by such interventions. So I'm showing you here like this footage from different exhibitions that happened in 2002 and 2003 in one of the leading galleries in Kiev at that time, which was called Marat Gelman Gallery, and which belonged to a very controversial again and very problematic figure in Ukrainian and Russian history, gallerist and political, how to say, technologist Marat Gelman. But for us at that time, especially for me, I was like 20 years old, so it didn't really matter to whom that thing belonged. For me, what mattered was that I met a very prominent personality. And this was like another major way how I fell in love with art. I fell in love through the energy of a particular person. And you see this person here in many photos. His name is Alexander Roitburt, and he was a famous Ukrainian artist and the director at the time of that gallery. He was one of the main figures in Ukrainian contemporary art. And it sounds so boring, but he wasn't boring at all. And especially for me, he was like more than 20 years older than me. It was an example of living creativity, living spirits that also does some art, that does some weird things, that embodies these things that I read about only in books before. Because I read a lot about, like, I don't know, transgression, contemporary art, contemporary philosophy, postmodernism, citation. Those were like hype words and hype topics back in the day. But this guy was not just like this, he embodied this in his everyday life, and we became very close friends. And I'm very happy to see today members of the family of Alexander Roitburt, his first wife Ira and his daughter Betty, who are my very good friends. So he became sort of my member of my family, not a husband, not a lover, don't think about it. Just a person with whom we somehow just, you know, had some intellectual chemistry, I would call it this way. And for me, this was such a powerful encounter that changed my entire life, because I thought, to be honest, that all contemporary art was like that. I thought that all universe was like that. Oh my God, I suddenly see an adult person, and that person is so full of colors, so full of energy, so full, and he's not an easy guy. He is like both black and white, right and left, and everything. I mean, he was a very complicated personality. So I was so impressed that, to be honest, the main reason why I think I remained in the contemporary art was this first impression. And of course, it gave me like those people with whom I met in 2002, they were all slightly older than me. And they are like peak of their creative energy was in 1990s. Those were the children of the collapse of the Soviet Union. And the collapse of the Soviet Union was nothing like a boring thing. It was like a huge explosion of creative energy. It was a huge explosion of exploration of all things weird, of exploration of sexuality, of exploration of transcendence through psychedelic substances, exploration of new ways of life through capitalism and through absolutely new mode of existence in which the country, together with all the artists, suddenly found itself. So they were kind of like a cool generation, but they were older. But I had an impression that when I enter the art world, from now on, all my life will be this like paradise with bohemian, transgressive adventures and naked people roaming around and having fun and orgies all the time. That was my, to be honest, serious impression of how the art world worked. And I am showing one of the photos that was taken by photographer Mykola Troch in 1990s, again in 1994, on the balcony of a famous Kiev art squad, Paris Commune, with some of the participants of that movement and that art squad, and you can see the energy. I am showing it just for the vibe, for you to understand how I thought artwork was. And of course, life is about discoveries. And you live and you learn, and you understand that not everything in this world is about that kind of vibe. Mm-hmm. And after I started working with contemporary art more and more, the interesting thing was that in Ukraine, a huge shift was happening in parallel. Contemporary art from a very narrow and marginal subculture, which probably was interesting to a couple of people, not couple of maybe dozens of people in Kiev at least, started turning into a very powerful political instrument and a very powerful part of the social life, because it coincided with the process when one of our leading oligarchs, Viktor Pinchuk, who was at the time the son-in-law of our president Leonid Kuchma, decided to use contemporary art as a tool of transformation of his international image from just being this gangster from the middle of nowhere into being this philanthropist and this patron of beautiful, everything beautiful and meaningful. That was a very widespread process in that particular time in 2004, 2005, 2006. Somehow, like the Western art world discovered this new money all over, international new money, as a source of additional income. And a lot of people all over the world, from China, from I don't know, not from Saudi Arabia was not a thing there, but maybe from Dubai, from all kinds of regions which were previously marginalized on the art map, started emerging, like somewhere in London, on all those big shows, on Art Basel. And for them, this supporting contemporary art started becoming this ticket into the new world, into the new social reality, where they were socializing with, like, some elites on a completely different level. So in Ukraine, it was happening as well. And no matter all this political background, it really brought a lot of change into Ukrainian cultural world, because suddenly we had a huge contemporary art center in the center of the city, which was showing Damien Hirst, Jeff Koons, you name it, Anthony Gormley, and all other big names of art, was spending, like, just throwing cash, like tens of millions of dollars, on inviting some super cool and fashionable artists and all that stuff. So, and it was all for free. So you could, like, there were queues in the middle of the city to just enter this wonderful mecca of contemporary art. Of course, and also Viktor Pinchuk, the owner of this art center, was the owner of the biggest, media holding in Ukraine. So non-stop on all his media, there would be interviews of contemporary artists. Like, people were told that, guys, contemporary art is so important. You can, Damien Hirst sold his diamond skull for $100 million. In 2006, for people in Ukraine, that was like some kind of very weird information, but it really resonated with people. People started coming into Pinchuk Art Center. So it became one of the first really fast developing new spheres of contemporary Ukrainian cultural world, because before that, everything it was in culture was more or less very marginalized, bohemian, and to some degree in decline, because movie production needs a lot of money. Theater was still, like, not a mass thing, but not a lot of people went to contemporary theaters. Like, literature was a very narrow niche where, like, people who knew, and the rest of the people were kind of like reading some mass production books brought from Russia, from leading publishing houses. So it was like not a desert, but it was a very strange cultural landscape. And suddenly in this cultural landscape, an explosion happens. Contemporary art comes, like the New Testament, the holy word of, Damien Hirst and his friends. And we hear it and we think, yeah, if Damien Hirst could sell his diamond skull for $100 million, I can also do it, maybe for 100 million hryvnias, but it will also be not a bad result for the beginning. So it really made an impression. People like smaller businessmen started opening their own contemporary art galleries. A lot of young graduates from universities started coming into contemporary art because they thought that at least something was happening in culture. You didn't have to work in the advertising agency anymore to make a living. You could do something that was meaningful, both meaningful and could make some money. That is the major problem and the major pitfall, because it seemed like you could make some money in that sphere. But if Damien Hirst made $100 million, that doesn't mean that as a graduate of a Ukrainian department of culturology or whatever, you can make at least 100 hryvnias on contemporary art. But we didn't know it, and we were full of expectation, and it felt like you could. So it gave us that impetus. And also, we are the product still to a large degree of Soviet education, where art is sacred and intellect is sacred. So working in the fields that are related to knowledge production has incredible additional value. It's not only that you are going to enjoy it, your grandmother will be proud of you, your father will be proud of you, your whole village will be proud of you, because you are working in something important. It really matters, and it really matters much more than it matters in the contemporary United States of America, where intellectual production is far less prestigious than it was, at least in my childhood and youth years. So it was a particular moment in history when I entered the world of Ukrainian art, not just as a bohemian girl, but as an actual art worker who had her independent career. Because before that, I was in the shadow of Alexander Roitberg, the guy whom I showed you previously, in the shadow of his charisma. Whatever happened to me, I was floating in that energy with a lot of happiness and joy, but it wasn't my independent life. But my independent life appeared to be far less transgressive, far less free, and far less full of cool stuff than I was expecting after meeting Alexander Roitberg. My adult life was quite boring, but it was what it was, and I was trying to do my best, because this idea to serve your motherland is one of the key things that I'm gonna talk about later in our mentality. So one of my first big projects on which I worked was, I was an editor-in-chief and the founder and of the magazine that was the biggest, we called it the biggest art magazine in Ukraine. The fact was that it was the only art magazine.
It wasn't complicated to be the largest.
I mean, it was as big as it could get in that particular historic situation. We had the printed version, and you could buy it in every kiosk, newspaper kiosk all over the country. You could subscribe to it and it would be mailed to you. So it was an adult, real magazine, not just some zine that somebody was printing on their own printer somewhere in their backyard, but it was a serious thing. And I remember that some people who were reviewing our activities, they were comparing us, for instance, to Vogue Ukraine. So we were on comparable scale. So I remember one journalist writing that, the Vogue Ukraine is far less cool than Art Ukraine. So, it was like a major thing. We had we first, among all Ukrainian media, we dedicated a lot of attention to our social media. So we amassed a huge audience at that time it seemed huge. We had some 50,000 people in Instagram, some 30,000 people in Facebook. It seemed like meaningful. We were visible. And it was important for me. And it was these are some of the covers of the magazine where I used to work, which I used to make. And we also had an online version, of course. And this was the team of our magazine. We were all, you guys, you see, young and full of energy. I don't know what happened with the third photo, but, bear with it. We are still there and we are very nice. And this magazine existed for several years in a row, which is rare. Rita probably knows it. Like such projects usually die in the first year or maybe first 2 years after they're established, because post-Soviet landscape was very unstable, especially when it comes to cultural things that are not funded by the government. And in Ukraine at that time, very few things were funded by the government. The government and the country, the Ukraine as a state basically didn't exist on our radars. It was somewhere else. It liked this folklore-oriented art, a lot of dancing, a lot of embroidery, also like embroidery, as you see. But it was the symbol of this old Soviet stagnation in terms of understanding Ukraine as this provincial village culture that is not capable of producing anything urban, anything contemporary, anything, I don't know, cool. And for some reason, as newly independent Ukrainian nation, we ourselves somehow for at least a couple of decades on the official level were supporting that legacy, where we embraced this idea of all this, very outdated attitude to arts, like as our official cultural policy. It was only like maybe 10 years ago when things started changing, and it changed because the new generation came to the scene, because after the revolution of dignity, a lot of things changed. But it took a lot of time for Ukraine to realize that culture was, like, as political analysts say, soft power. It is an instrument of creating identity, not just, decorum shallow as a background. It can be powerful. And in a way, it's very good that our country didn't discover it earlier, because I can imagine the ugly forms in which which could influence the arts if our state would support it. But my other project on which I worked for many years as a chief curator and deputy director was Mistetsky Arsenal. It's a huge museum and exhibition complex right in the center of Kiev, which is a former military storage and military factory. It's like, I don't know if you guys know it, in Venice, one of the main venues for Venice Biennale is also Arsenal. It's also an old storage of arms and armory. I don't know, probably is right the English word to say. So Mistetsky Arsenal is like, it's the space of Louvre, but unfortunately not the collection of Louvre and not the budget of Louvre. And but when you just see the halls, when you see the space, when you see the possibilities which this space gives, you fall in love. And again, you don't think about money, you don't think about your career as some steps to some success or something. You just you see the window of opportunities open and you want to jump into this window, because it's like, it always felt like in Ukraine, like it's for the first time. Something happens like for the first time, because we're the first generation who has these opportunities. Before that, it was a closed Soviet factory. You needed an ID to get there, and now we can make a contemporary art show there. It's cool, right? So yeah, this is a photo of the main entrance to this exhibition complex in 2011. I started working there in 2010, and you see a poster there. It's a big exhibition of prominent avant-garde artist Vasily Yermilov, one of the main superstars of Ukrainian and Russian, also Soviet avant-garde. So suddenly, if you remember the pictures from my bohemian start of my career, suddenly my career looked very different, very different. The landscape in which I found myself was absolutely not what I expected to see in my life ever. It was all very serious. It was all, and especially because it was the peak of the interest to contemporary art in Ukraine. Mistetsky Arsenal became like kind of the main competitor of our major center of contemporary art, Pinchuk Center. And we were in spotlights. We had like many journalists coming to our press conferences. We had like thousands of people attending our openings. It suddenly felt even like weird to be in so much attention, like to be in such spotlight. But that, of course, create a lot of other things, like it creates a lot of conflict, it creates a lot of jealousy. But our idea was to simulate, even if we didn't have the budget of Louvre, but to at least simulate that we are this real, proper contemporary art institutions, in spite of the fact that our toilets would not work properly, our floor would be just a disaster. We needed to find an oligarch to put a floor into that whole building. We even were joking that on our banners we should put, I don't know if you guys know Russian, we should write «Половой партнер Мистецкого арсенала», because everybody, we had those banners where there would be the partner who made this for us, the partner who made
like
this.
a wordplay, because
Yeah.
wall is sex, but also it's a floor.
Yeah,
so it's like a sex partner or the sponsor for the floor.
Yeah, so it was basically a very weird situation when it looked from the outside as it was a serious institution. But Mistetsky Arsenal, unlike Pinchuk Art Center, was a state institution, also in a very weird position, not even a museum officially. It just was some sort of a building that belonged to the state. Which has a lot of consequences in terms of funding, in terms of how you can operate on the everyday basis. So it's like but from the outside, it created this impression of a very vibrant thing. So yeah, this was one of the openings in Arsenal. You can see the amount of people. It was very unusual for Ukraine to have so many people. To be honest, the amount of interest towards contemporary art was in general a very paranormal thing. I remember Anthony Gormley, one of the main sculptors in contemporary art, is a superstar. I mean, super big name. He came to one of the exhibitions. He had a personal show in Pinchuk Art Center, I think around 2007, maybe. I don't remember the exact date. And there was a press conference, and me and my friend, artist Volodya Kuznetsov, were standing somewhere, and then suddenly this Anthony Gormley comes to us, asks us a couple of things, understands that we know English, and I was like, oh, can you guys help me? Can we go downstairs into my show? I want you to pose in front of my camera. I want some people in the space of my show. And we're, yeah, of course. I mean, to be in the photo of Anthony Gormley is a huge thing. And we go downstairs, and there are like crowds of people. There is some topless woman pressing herself, I'm not joking, against one of the artworks for a photo. I don't remember what exactly was the reason why she
wasn't famine.
No, it was just like this true response to contemporary art, like this grassroots, fascination. Anthony Gormley was shocked to the point that I cannot describe to you, because he said, like, it never happens in Britain. Like, mainly older people go to my shows, and I see like maybe a couple of dozens people here and there. It's never like, and this is suddenly you're in pop culture. You're a superstar. So it was like a very strange situation. I think it was created by this hunger to everything cultural that was prevalent in the country, because we modernized very rapidly, and the new generation grew up, but at the same time there were very few opportunities. The borders were still closed. You needed a visa to go to see real contemporary art museums or something. We felt ourselves some sort of orphans. We were like we didn't belong to anywhere and didn't understand anything, and everywhere we were aliens, because if you go to Europe, they look at you like some person from some very strange, wild country. In Russia, you don't belong to that space anymore, and you have very clear ideas that this is, I mean, you still make friends with people at that time, and you are very socially active, but it's still not your cup of tea anymore. So you kind of don't have anything. It's just like, so it gives a huge motivation to put the production locally, like to do something in your country, to make it like as great as, I don't know, to make your art center as Louvre or MoMA. And it was interesting. So that's one of the photos where you can see the beautiful, not only beautiful us, but also beautiful halls of art arsenal. And this is only a small fraction of that exhibition space. That space is just divine. I mean, it is amazing. It is huge. It is very, very breezy. It is like, it was as if it was made for contemporary art exhibitions. And who cares that, again, that it doesn't bring you money? If it brings you this opportunities and this, and if you can still survive. The interesting thing in Ukraine, unlike in the United States, is that you can be on a very basic, I don't know how to explain it. You can survive on bare minimum, and you don't even care about it. Like, you have very little money, you don't have any savings. I never had any savings. I never paid any taxes in my entire. Probably they paid when I was officially employed, maybe some taxes, but it's never the things that we think about. Like, money, come on, like you have $100, okay, you can somehow survive. Universe is going to take care of you. I have a friend in California. He's a homeless artist, and he says, like, I have a trust fund. I have trust in the universe. So that was basically our trust fund. And to a certain degree it worked, but unfortunately this whole thing, it works very well when you're still very young. It starts working much worse when you get older, and when you understand that you're moving in the direction of your previous generation, whom you were despising so much because they were those boring babushkas and dedushkas, grandmothers and grandfathers, and you are this absolutely new bud of new Ukraine, whose life won't be like that. But then you suddenly realize that, maybe not. And that is an interesting situation. And so I just wanted to show you, this is basically, I was looking yesterday for photos, and I look more or less like that in most of the photos of that period. And it's like, it was terrible. It was very exhausting. It was very not what I really wanted to do. But at the same time, you are so stuck in this optimism and this euphoria and this hopes for better future, for something bigger than just you, that you kind of continue doing what you're doing. And the dream is always, somewhere else. So this I started conceptualizing this problems already when I was like 35ish, 60ish. I started making exhibitions dedicated to the precarity of artists in Ukraine, not only in Ukraine. Like, for instance, this was a huge show in Mistetsky Arsenal, which we made together with my colleague Eva Sulik. She's now in Harvard as a scholar, and she is a Polish curator and artist and screenwriter, a lot of things. And it was actually her idea to bring a lot of Polish art to Ukraine and to do something related to artistic labor. And then we expanded this to not only the labor of artists, but also the labor of art workers, and made a huge show which later traveled to Poland. And we were trying to think about the future of employment. It was a new thing now. Now everybody and their mama are speaking that AI is going to take our jobs. It's not a big news. But back in the day, there was no AI. And it was something new because I read some books. I went to California and I read, oh, wow, there will be no more jobs anymore. We will be like horses who got extinct and now are kept for entertainment only. Wow, that was some new things that I read in the book written by, surprisingly, by a very intelligent person, Max Tegmark, but he's an intelligent person in his own way in tech field, but somehow his statements in terms of humanities were so outrageously not in the line with anything that I heard of in humanities, because we were all like, you don't speak about slavery so easily in humanities, and we will have AI as our slave. This is an impossible phrase in the humanities, but it was still possible in 2017 in the book written by tech guy. And the phrase that we will be like horses impressed me a lot. Like he meant that like when cars got invented, billions of horses got basically almost extinct. But then they were revived by passionate people who liked them for sports and entertainment. And I was like thinking like, wow, we as humans will be somebody's sports and entertainment. So it's like, it was interesting, but yeah. And yeah, this is me and my co-curator in front of one of the artworks by the way, by the artist who, when I see that he was giving a talk here about the communization in Ukraine, Vova Voretnyov. And it says "Praca zveličuje," which means labor makes you great. It's like this glorifies you. I don't even know how to.
Yeah. Labor nobles.
Nobles, yeah.
Nobles.
Yeah. Make nobles you. So it's like this old Soviet slogan that was he captured on one of his. It was a part of his long-standing performance and documentation of his performance in rural Ukraine, and this remains of Soviet language and Soviet mentality in this newly very weird capitalist landscape of rural Ukraine. So yeah. So I do, and predominantly, in my experience, the people who are most precarious in at least Ukrainian art world, and I think in Russian as well, probably to some extent, are females. And why are we as intelligent, educated women choosing this kind of lifestyle for ourselves? I kept thinking about it, and I had this idea this is the view of the art center where I used to be the chief curator and deputy director, Mistetsky Arsenal, just from a different side, from a different angle. And you see that it stands just in the heart of Ukraine. This is the bell tower of Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, the biggest, one of the biggest monasteries of the Orthodox East, and one of the biggest, definitely the biggest monastery of Ukraine, and this hub for everything Orthodox and religious. And surprisingly, as I discovered, our Mistetsky Arsenal was built only in the 18th century, and it was built on the place of a former female monastery. That was because that was a male monastery originally. And it's interesting, but back in the days, they preferred to put a male monastery and a female monastery next to each other, which of course created a lot of rumors regarding how monks were, hanging out together. But the official explanation was because if you are retired and you want to go seek some spiritual path, it's nicer to retire next to your former wife and just to to be able to meet each other from time to time. So that was what I read about it. So our Mistetsky Arsenal was a place of very old historic female monastery, and there is a huge irony in it because basically we did function as a female monastery. We were mainly a team of very obsessed females, very obsessed with contemporary art, and not driven to that extent by money, but mainly driven by this almost religious ideas, and which in the secular landscape of Ukraine at that time just transformed into this kind of stuff. And these are the drawings of this monastery. And it's interesting that the mother of one of the main figures in Ukrainian art, Hetman Ivan Mazepa. I don't know if you know him, but he was main figure both in Ukrainian narratives, historical, and Russian narratives, because he's a main enemy in the Russian historical narrative because he betrayed, so-called betrayal of Peter the Great, and decided to align with Swedish folks to create some sort of an independent Ukraine or whatever. So he's a very famous figure. And when his war against Peter I and near Poltava, Poltavskaya Bitva, so the famous he lost that war. After that, Peter the Great had a huge act of revenge against him, and he destroyed a lot of things that belonged to this Ivan Mazepa. And among them was this female monastery on the territory of which I used to work, because the the chief nun there was his mother, the mother of Ivan Mazepa. So it was like an act of this imperial revenge against Ukrainian rebellion, but also, yeah, the site of a female labor and selfless female labor. And this is one of the photos, I think it was taken in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, in late 2016 in Mistetsky Arsenal. And you can see the proportion of the workers. And yeah, you see some males here. This is Alexander Solovyov, one of the famous Ukrainian art historians, and his colleague, and the others. This is the artist that we are representing. You know, the priest in the female monastery is always a guy. So everybody are women, but they, for some reason, need the male authority to come and to, you know, do all the sermons. So we had like our male authority. It's actually a very good Ukrainian artist, and it was his personal show, Alexander Dubovik, a postmodernist. And the rest are women. All people who are not women there are our technical staff. It's like either drivers or, I don't know, people who were helping us to carry stuff around so they are not like intellectual labor of any sort. So it's mainly a female group, and all those people are severely underpaid. And at the same time, they are extremely happy and proud of their position because that's the nature of reality, and it used to be the nature. But for instance, to show you that this was not only the problem of women, the man whom I'm showing you here, Alexander Solovyov, is an older generation of art historians and curators, and he's actually a superstar in Ukraine. And for me, to be honest, one of the formative impressions that I had was when I suddenly realized that the author of the photographs that I showed you in the beginning of my presentation, those naked guys in the Donbass, lives in the huge mansion in the center of the city. And this guy lives in a tiny apartment on the outskirts and uses like 3 types of public transport to get every day to our exhibition hall. And he's already not young, as you see. He wasn't even young back in the day. So this disproportion of
Reward.
financial reward to people in the same field, because one of the main reasons why the guy who made those photos is so rich now is because, I mean, I don't mind him being rich, I'm very happy for him, I love him, was because this guy curated his exhibitions, this guy promoted him, this guy did everything. But this guy was, for some reason, I don't know, maybe it's karma, as the Indians say, he was on the side of the selfless service. He wasn't producing anything, and as a result, he didn't have anything basically to sell. So on the art market, newly emerging, he was far less potent, like less prominent than the guy who had something to offer. So this, to be honest, made me think about it, and I suddenly realized that when I entered the art world, I had a very confused identity because Soviet Union gave me basically 2 roles, role models of how things can evolve in my career if I am somehow related to the art world. One role model was a muse. It is like this nice, beautiful woman who lays on the couch and inspires the artist to do something great. And she is like, you know, you see here, it's a very good, I don't care about the quality of, I mean, artistic quality of this painting, but it's a very good reflection of how this works in the mass mentality. And another role model is Ekaterina Furtseva. It's just an example. It's a Soviet minister of culture for many years, like a tough iron lady who was a Soviet functionary who in this boring clothes and a part of this infrastructure, official nomenclature. So these were basically main role models between my personal career. I think to a certain extent, just till some point, oscillated between those two, nerves. And another problem that we have in Ukraine is the idea of motherland. The idea of motherland as the ever-suffering entity. Our mother is always in pain, and especially for my generation, because I don't know, I cannot speak about other people's experience, but I have been in for all my life, like for the first thing, the Soviet Union collapsed. Then you had to understand what is your identity. And there was a lot of struggle back in the days about like newly emerging Ukrainian identity. And our motherland needed us to specify that identity and to build the new Ukraine. Then Orange Revolution happened in 2004. And again, our motherland needed us. Then another revolution happened in 2014. And again, our motherland needed us. Then you know what happened. And the motherland, it's like this neurotic mother that is always in pain and is always not satisfied with you. It's never enough. It's never enough. You cannot do things and think, okay, now I did everything for my motherland and she'll be happy. No. She'll be always unhappy and she'll be always suffering. And at the same time, she's like this, like there is this famous icon of Jesus Christ that is weeping with one eye and is kind of smiling with another eye. So it's from Sinai, a famous icon. So our motherland is also to a certain extent like that, because it is always suffering and you are like in huge pain just seeing it. But at the same time, you hear all those narratives about corruption, oligarchy, about all those weird things. So it's like one hand is like in somebody's pocket. And it is like a very confusing identity that it creates, because you don't know to which narrative you should navigate in your everyday life decisions. And this idea of this motherland in pain was actually, it was born, I'm sure that it's much older than this, but one of the first incidents when this myth started being exploited was during the Second World War, when an artist, Irakli Taidze, created this famous poster that was meant to mobilize people and that portrayed in this case, it was Russia or Soviet Union, or I think it didn't really matter which particular part of the Soviet Union he was speaking about it, but it's a mother who wants you and who wants you to be at war and who wants you to fight. So this is so embedded in our consciousness that it gives a lot of positive, of course, outcomes today when the other war is taking place in Ukraine, because a lot of people are mobilized, a lot of people work as volunteers. And again, it's selfless service, because of they hear this call of the motherland. It is always in our hearts. It is always in our heads. Because I think what happened, like it's surprising, but contemporary Russian state behaves as this patriarchal father who wants you to stay away. He says like, okay, I'll take care of it. You just don't interfere. Stay away from everything important. Just play with your toys, sit in your hipster cafe, drink coffee. It will be fine. I'll take care of serious stuff. I'll do war in Ukraine. I'll do this, that, oil business, and you just play. So Ukraine is nothing like that. Ukraine is the opposite of that, in fact. Ukraine always wants you to be there. And at some point, of course, it brings a lot of exhaustion. It burns you out, because it is too much responsibility. And of course, it's more like a moral economy rather than a professional economy. And of course, for women, because we are like wired more or less like biologically, it's bad to say it, but there is certain maternal instinct, especially in women like me who don't have biological children. There is an urge to nurse somebody. So you basically exercise this nursing instinct on helping somebody else. And I know a lot of people from my generation who always postpone because somehow society gives you this conflicting messages. First, it tells you like, no, we are all in Bohemia, we're all transgressive, we're all and then we make careers. Children, come on, I till recently didn't know any people who had children and who would get married. I was among the first people who got married in my immediate social circle, and I was 38 when I did it. So it wasn't like a big thing, at least in my generation. So I know a lot of women who actually at some point realized that they were biologically deprived of something, and then started, like a lot of women art workers, several at least that I know, they adopted children, and this is a very noble thing that I was never able to do, but it is a very big part of our identity crisis. When you reach certain stage in your life, when you understand that you lack a lot of things that normal people who worked as managers and I don't know what else have, and you are just like alone sitting with 3 cats in a small apartment somewhere in the middle of nowhere, it is not a very pleasant discovery, to be honest. And it also shapes you. And I was thinking that in Russian language and in former post-Soviet unified this universe, which existed for a couple of decades before it just exploded, there was this like phrase, «Искусство требует жертв». Art demands sacrifices. And I was thinking, why does art demand sacrifices? Is it some pagan religion that needs sacrifices? Why do we have this like, and it's imprinted in our mentality. We always think that art demands sacrifices. And apparently this phrase comes from this French popular some proverbs that means like one must suffer to be beautiful, which again applies mainly to women. Right. Because men don't have to suffer to be beautiful. They're just beautiful the way they are. And women have to wear high heels, I don't know, do some implants, whatever, depending on the vibe you are going for. So it's just like, it's always females who have to suffer. So it is interesting that in our space, it made such a huge impression that like, yeah, of course, art demands sacrifices. Where's your sacrifice? And of course, at some point you get disillusioned and you get tired of all that. And surprisingly, it doesn't stop your career. You continue doing things, and it's an interesting stage in your personal development, because you get disillusioned, but it's very difficult to say goodbye to our motherland. And it's especially difficult to say goodbye to the selfless service. And you continue kind of doing what you used to be doing with that like religious fervor, but now you don't have it anymore, but you still are. I'm still a Ukrainian kind of curator. I'm still doing something. I'm writing books. I'm making exhibitions. I'm making my own art. It's always for the sake of my motherland, for the sake of something bigger and better. But I myself am very disillusioned. I don't have all those optimistic ideals that I used to have. But still, you are trying to change something. And my personal path is like, I always try to change something. This is the exhibition in Ludwig Museum in Budapest. One of my other like endeavors was to try to promote Ukrainian art internationally. It was a huge thing before 2022 when Ukraine was everywhere, because we were invisible. We were in this absolutely invisible part of the European continent, where you are not exotic enough to be, interesting because you are strange, and at the same time you are not a part of a bigger family of European nations. So you are kind of like marginalized to the point where you are absolutely invisible. And I did several projects that were aiming to change that. And to be honest, like now I'm also even disillusioned in that, because I don't think that we Ukrainians have to look for outsiders' gaze to validate our existence. It is a very stupid thing to do, because I remember when I was so upset, like when at Centre Pompidou in Paris, I was speaking to a curator and I was showing him our artworks, including Alexander Roitberg's paintings, and he said like, this is all garbage. Our painting died in 1954. And I was like, but it died in France, maybe. I don't know your situation, but it didn't die in our country. It was relevant, and it was relevant in the in intellectual also in the intellectual production. It wasn't just like beautiful things produced for the sake of mere beauty. It was contemporary art. But because there is this colonialism, art history is very full of colonial biases. Like they don't trust me as a Ukrainian art curator or an art specialist to represent my culture. Like an artist from Ukraine still is trusted to represent her or his culture because, oh yeah, it's an artist, you get like 3 seconds of attention, but that's another question. But you can represent. As an intellectual, as a curator, as a art worker, no one is interested in your opinion because people know better. There are grown-ups in the room who know better how it should be and how when painting died, when it was born, and I was very dissatisfied with that and very disappointed. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to actually publish this book in order for no one to tell me this thing anymore. At least to be able to show them something in their language and in their in the publishing house that they know and love to prove that we have our voice and we know what we are saying and we are not stupid. So this is challenging us, and it became very different after the beginning of the war because we had an opposite problem. We had too much attention suddenly, and attention to absolutely sometimes random things. So it was like it would be like the best of stuff along with some absolutely, I don't know, unknown thing from the middle of nowhere put together side by side just because there is so much attention to Ukraine for that very narrow amount of time that anything goes, which created a lot of misunderstandings. But it's also like, of course, for Ukrainian culture, it's good. And again, you see, I'm using this vocabulary of my motherland. I don't know who's talking to you right now, that woman or me. Because this is my mask that I've been wearing for so many years and now decades that I'm so used to it that it's very difficult to, to try to understand whether there is anything behind that mask. And I wanted to show you my artworks, but it's like we don't have time for that. That was a previous. I'll just do a slideshow for you to understand. These were my paintings. This one was in Bodem Museum in Germany for a while. And this was my movie that I made in the former estate of our president, Viktor Yanukovych, in 2014, with the guys who captured that estate. So there was like this $1 billion estate that was absolutely left alone. Like you could just like roam around, take whatever you want. And there was this small group of people that was trying to prevent, looting. And including us, a small group again of women. We were 3 women. One, the director of National Art Museum, me, and a woman from that. It was still the Museum of Russian Art at that point. Now it's Kiev Painting Gallery. And we were 3 of us in the middle of like those guys with guns. Just trying to save some icons because there was a lot of artworks in that estate, and not to put our motherland to shame, because your motherland shouldn't be known to international public as the place where people are looting ex-presidents' estates. It's obvious. So that was my movie, and now I'm like, you see, I am protesting in a silent way against contemporary art, trying to create some things that would be as far and as detached from the world that I knew and loved for so many years as possible. But at the same time, I have an urge to do something manually because this is my way of psychotherapy. This is like for me, this is the only way not to really go to a mental hospital. That's why I'm still doing something, but I'm trying to make it like very detached from the art that I have been promoting for so many years as a curator and art historian and everything. Because in parallel, I also like naive art. I like folk art. I like art that believes in itself. I like art as a form of magic, as a form of transformation of reality, as this thing that you create and you believe in its power. It might be not true, but you should believe in its power. And when you have this faith, something magical starts happening. and some alchemical transformation happens. So I'm trying to open my heart and be this like artist with a sincere heart, in spite of the fact that my heart is absolutely not sincere and is very spoiled by contemporary art. But I'm trying to create a sub-personality that is very detached from that. So this is my most recent textile sculpture. It's dedicated to the year of the horse that is coming. And these are some of my art quilts that I'm creating. I mean, these are like applique quilts. These are the books that I'm writing, just in case, you know. And this was the last book that actually was published after this. Again, as a servitude to my motherland, because my husband is from India and I got inspired by Indian culture and I learned a lot about during the pandemic and after that. And when the war started, I realized that speaking about Ukraine being in California and spreading this word, just like it is very hypocritical because I'm not able to represent the country the way I used to represent it when I actually lived there. So I decided that my way of doing something for Ukraine would be to publish something in Ukraine that would be meaningful for people there, not to spread the word here. And I made this book that is called The Greatness of the Goddess. It's a Ukrainian adaptation of old Sanskrit story about the goddess, which is the embodiment of Shakti, the force that descends to people in the times of crisis and fights the demons. And it's a very magical tantric text, which surprisingly got super popular. It's my most popular book so far. And my friend recently sent me a photo. He was taking a taxi on the war zone somewhere in the eastern Ukraine, and the taxi driver had a sticker from my book. So I'm really proud of it, and it has nothing to do. I made illustrations also, but it is very different from what I used to do before. But I'm trying to experiment because, again, if you don't experiment, you just stagnate. And I want to end this presentation again on the two photos of me with Alexander Roitbord, the artist from whom my career started, because we remained friends throughout all my life until like 2021 when he died. We were very close, and I think that first impulse, that first impression, that first like impetus of something different that he gave me, it shaped my life, to better or worse, but it did. And I also made a quilt, wall hanging, dedicated to his death. It's a long story why it is like that, but it's, again, I remember him, and I mean, I live with his legacy and with something that he planted in me.
Was so great. It was a little bit more than an hour, but it was absolutely impossible to stop, and I felt shame to stop you, so I just couldn't.
I'm sorry.
So, but we still have like good, like I think 20 minutes to talk, right? And I'm pretty sure that you guys have a lot of questions, and the students who are in this room have privilege to ask their questions if they want to. So, first question. Who wants to start? Well, I can start. Okay.
You want to go? Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll use my privilege right now, right? Alisa, that was absolutely wonderful. And I really like the metaphor of monastery, because in my own research, which was mostly focused on Russia and the UK, my major metaphor is a factory.
Yeah.
Because also, like, there are a lot of gentrified buildings, and especially in the post-Soviet context, it's an idea of the new Stahanovite who would just stay and work all night and prepare the opening, and again, like being absolutely precarious and absolutely selfless. So I was just thinking about this monastery metaphor, and my question actually comes from my studies in the UK. And like, surprise, there's a lot of precarity there also, and it's growing with austerity. So there, I think, but the logic of being selfless, delivering selfless labor is very different. So it's like an individual project that is opposite to, like working in a bank. like I'm not involved, my identity is crazy if I'm not involved in like boring but profitable job. So I'm living in a different world. So it's very like, self-centered. And in this way, not sacrifices. Like you just like your profit is not monetary. So in this way, I see similarities. There's this story of Kiev and what I found in the cities of Russia. And like, do you think like this idea of self-sacrificing and kind of like serving, служение, do you think it's somehow Soviet or pre-Soviet, and what are the roots of it?
I mean, the idea of selfless labor and selfless sacrifice is a founding stone of many world religions and spiritual practices. And it's considered, to be honest, even beneficial for a person. And to large degree, it is, because you give up your ego and you serve something bigger, and it is especially relevant in contemporary world driven by a lot of narcissism and a lot of self-centered, this drive. So it's an interesting way to live your life. But at the same time, I think in our culture, yeah, of course, Soviet Union shaped us greatly. I don't know, maybe even Eastern Christianity, in to a certain degree, shaped us. That we have to, because there is this idea of service to your nation. If you remember in the literature of 19th century as well, it's everywhere. You have to serve. You have to serve your people, and you have to give up your personal interests maybe this is also maybe it has something to do with nationalism and how to say, the birth of a subject and then the opposing trends of like the death of the subject. Whereas the subject is too strong, there are always desires to make it slightly more fluent and useful for the larger society. So I don't really know where it comes from, but it is definitely still there. And the service is everywhere now. It's like it's the problem with this service is that in Western world, it is of course also there. It's not that like, oh my God, the cultural workers are underpaid only in Ukraine or in Moldova or in Russia or else. It's the same here, I think. But there are a little bit different circumstances here because, at least from what I know, a lot of people who choose the career of artist or art worker in this culture, they come from like, let's say, upper middle class background. And it's a completely different social situation because in our case, you can come from a village and you have nothing and you still are absolutely driven by the idea that you don't even need anything because you need to serve. So it's like when you are more or less financially secure from your generational, side, and at least somehow, it makes things very different socially. So it is difficult to compare those situations. I'm not saying that we are suffering more than you guys are suffering here. It would be a very stupid thing to say because a lot of people from all kinds of backgrounds are still like pursuing art as a career, and a lot of them are first generation, like let's say people who go to college first generation. Like I have a friend of mine, Jody Hudson. He's a guy from Detroit, and he's an orphan from a foster family, and he's a person of color, and he is like, and he's the first person who got college degree in his entire family, and he is an artist. He's an animator and jobless now.
So we have the first.
Okay. I actually have two questions, if it's okay. The first is just your research on psychedelics. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you came to that topic and kind of what your initial kind of observations are. And then the second question is, I read the book, which I really adored and was so impressed by obviously the breadth of your understanding of art in Ukraine. And I was wondering if there are sort of pockets of time or artists or archives or collections that you feel haven't really been appreciated in Ukraine, or even in Ukraine, I mean, outside, I mean, we'll just assume that most people don't know much about art in Ukraine, but what stories haven't been told from
Yeah.
about art in Ukraine that you think need to be?
I will start from the second question, because of course there are like plenty of blind spots in Ukrainian art history, and Ukrainian art history to a certain degree is one entire blind spot. And my humble endeavor to at least piece together at least something, and at least my understanding, because it's a very personal selection. There is no canon in the pure understanding of this word, because Ukraine changes like its how to say it understanding of itself too quickly for something like a firm canon to be born. So we have the Soviet canon that is like very outdated. But after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the art history was not the most blooming field. Unlike like contemporary art, is a field where like people were selling art, buying art, watching art, enjoying, just being somehow a part of the this community is one thing, but like serious research, it was not the time for that kind of stuff. So of course there I think more lacunes, like more blind spots than actually well researched places. And on top of it, a lot of things, like there is fashion everywhere. People suddenly get it's like that everywhere. Like people suddenly get inspired by some things that somebody wrote and it was like very inspiring, and then everybody and their mama is doing the same thing again and again. But we had this with Paris Commune Squad in the 1990s in Kiev. It was a very sexy place where a lot of nice things happened. But now, after 10 years or 15 years, like there are like zillions of things dedicated to that particular place, and zero things dedicated to other things that might also deserve equal attention. So it's like very disproportional. And but at the same time, a lot of things are being improved. A lot of researchers are working. I think the amount of people is growing. Now it's completely different situation because a lot of people are know English. Before that, our lingua franca for the previous generations was Russian. So it was very difficult for people, even those who had enough education, enough intellectual powers, it was very difficult for them to somehow interact with the wider community because of the language barrier. Today it's like much easier with all the technology, and a lot of younger people, they just pursue education in the West, so they have a wider perspective, and the Academy of Arts in Ukraine is modernized to a certain extent. So a lot of things are happening. So I don't know what is going to come out of it, but it's important. It's just important to keep this like balance between sincere research and weaponizing of culture. It is an unpopular thing to say, I know, but there is a lot of that happening now, and it is inevitable in this terrible situation that is going on in Ukraine. But if there is such a thing as pure art history, is there such a thing? I don't know. But if we assume that there is something like that, probably a slightly more neutral and disengaged stance is healthier to a certain extent. But it's impossible to speak about even it now, because it's like, how can you be disengaged from the actual war? And it's difficult, it's very problematic, and it creates a lot of problems for artists, because now artists are kind of encapsulated in only one topic, and it becomes like self-repetitive, because if you want to be heard on the international scene now, the only thing that you can speak about is like your thing. And this is how the art world works. If you are from a first world country, you can speak about anything. You can speak about abstract beauty of this whatever this lamp is, and I don't know, it's existential power. As an artist from Ukraine,
Existential crisis.
or from Iran, you don't expect like this. You, as an artist from Iran, you have a very narrow amount of topics that can be interesting elsewhere about you. The same about Ukrainians or our this existential struggles. No one is interested in that. All that happened beyond that, like machine of war that is now unfolding, it's like it's again in the blind spot. And so we are all becoming this fuel for something bigger than us, and again, for the problems of our motherland, which are obviously like really serious. So, and then like speaking about psychedelics, that was my, again, way of changing my perspective a little bit, because I've been doing all those politically inspired projects for many years. Exhibitions dedicated to Ukrainian art and revolutions, texts that were conceptualizing certain transformations in our society after the collapse of the Soviet Union, after the revolution of dignity, after this and that. So I already exhausted my how to say, curiosity about this, and I am very burnt out, because when yet another crisis started happening, and when it reached the scale of the ongoing war, I was so traumatized that I understood that I can't do anything anymore. It's larger than me. It's happening no matter what. And whatever what efforts we were doing, those beautiful exhibitions that we were making, those wonderful art centers that we were building, it is still like a disaster. And I am a granddaughter of a Ukrainian, and a daughter of Ukrainian professors of history. And I grew up with a very talkative grandmother who was speaking about disasters non-stop. I grew up in a disaster. I grew up in a discourse of total disaster. Somebody was repressed, somebody was executed, somebody was tortured, somebody was killed in Holocaust, somebody was barely killed in Holocaust, somebody doesn't even know whether they had any relation to that topic. And it's like, and then somebody was the director of the concentration camp, and it's like, it's a mess. It's a mess. Our I never feel secure. I sit in California and see the beautiful forest, and I only think that now the earthquake should happen. Because what else? Like, it cannot be peaceful in my life. My life is always in a disaster mode. And my grandmother, when she was dying, I was afraid to tell her about the war, that it started. And then we eventually told her about the war, and she was almost about to die. And she suddenly resurrected, because disaster was her normal way of being. She suddenly felt comfortable. She started singing. She, this is our mentality. So I was so disillusioned by all that, and so traumatized, that I decided to branch out. And I was writing something about my this book about India, and I was on the website, what is this, JSTOR, and I was suddenly like, there is this, like, it's almost like a social media now, they suggest what you can read, and there was something like very brutal there, like somebody's anthropological account of some sexual experiences in some LGBT sexual experiences in North India. And it was apparently somebody who lived, who worked for a Canadian university. And I was shocked by it. I was like, people do some things that are interesting for them. And that they are like, they're participating in that stuff, and they are cool. It's not just like, as a researcher, you shouldn't like only choose the topics that your motherland imposes on you, and which again like promote maybe, okay, I'm not so interested in Indian sex and even in LGBT topics, but I might do something that is interesting for me, that used to be a huge part of my personal development. And that personal development includes psychedelic experiments to a large degree, because it was a huge part of Ukrainian art community in the late 1990s and early 2000s. When I just entered the scene, it was heavily influenced by psychedelic optics. Not by drugs themselves and their habitual taking, but by the idea of changing that the reality is like this quantum field that you can actually enter and experience as that absolutely undivided field. And this psychedelic experience as a way of protest, as a territory of alternative to Soviet ideological system, to post-Soviet vacuum, to lack of meaning in this whole society. And when you suddenly explore a new continent, and you suddenly can speak about it because there is a huge body of work related to that topic in Ukrainian art. So I decided why not? It's a very developing field in contemporary US academia. I recently went to a Harvard Divinity School, and they have a huge program, Transcendence and Transformations, that is dedicated to the study of psychedelic substances, not as a recreational mode, but as a means of exploring mystical realities. I'm very interested in mystical realities. I'm very interested in the divine. I'm a nun, almost. I feel myself like one. So yeah, that was my source of inspiration.
I think we have time to accommodate two very short questions. Please use this chance not to see nightmares or having FOMO.
I think there was one online.
That's one online. Thank you. Oh, that's Olga who wants to speak. Could we please let Olga speak?
You should be able to unmute now.
Olga?
Yes, okay. For some reason, I can't start video, but it doesn't matter. What I wanted to say, first of all, Alisa, your own artwork is very, very beautiful.
Thank you.
It seems that you are. I mean, it was very. I'm very grateful that you spoke so frankly about your own experience, and your own voice sounds so interesting. I am interested in the artists and the art as it kind of faces the other, as opposed to is a receptacle for the artist's own impressions. And in your case, the shift is very interesting. I find it very beautiful. You don't have to represent Ukraine out of patriotism in order to somehow, you become kind of a channel for its culture, for today's outsiders, and I find this very moving. Without making it, by the way, without making it exotic, because your textile sculptures and quilts, etc., they are very beautiful, yet they have a grain of irony towards the characters represented. So it's I really appreciate it a lot. Just one tiny detail about making sacrifices for art. It seems to be very much present in the rhetoric of the Moscow Art Theater, especially Stanislavski himself, much parodied by Kiev's own Bulgakov. And what I find very interesting also is that it may even owe a lot to Pushkin's again ironic claim made by Mozart to Salieri. Mozart seems to assume Salieri's point when he says, you already knows he's being poisoned, but yes, he says, нас мало избранных счастливцев праздных единого прекрасного жрецов. And this idea of the priests of beauty presupposes, of course, жрец presupposes жертва, right? So there's always this element there. But what I find very interesting is that, unlike Stanislavski, Pushkin has tons of irony about it. And it seems to me that your own tone of this presentation and your own art is particularly captivating because it has the same irony. It's very loving, and yet you have some distance of irony. And I found it very moving, on the real artistic level. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind words. Yeah, I unfortunately didn't have awareness of timing. I'm sorry. There are a lot of things happening in my personal life in the last couple of days, so I got a little confused. And I didn't have time to speak more about this transformation, which was super important for my personal development. When I've been making art since 2007. And I started surprisingly by making Orthodox icons, just because this was the most detached thing from the contemporary art world in which I grew up. I needed something that was completely different. And it was very interesting for me to explore art from a completely different angle. And then I started making paintings. But for many years, I kept privacy. I was super secretive about my artistic practice because nowadays, for younger generations, it's absolutely okay, normalized to combine curatorial work with their artistic practice. But because I so early became on how to say, I mean, the field was vacant. It wasn't because I was so great. It was because the field was vacant. So I suddenly was on the top of that infrastructure, and because I was there, like there were so many people whose interests were involved there. So I was this very tight knot of somebody else's artistic interest and prestige making and everything, that like adding on top of it the layer of my personal art, which is very personal. You probably saw it, like it's very intimate even. I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm trying to be as sincere as possible. So opening this like wounded heart to that like cruel art world was a little bit not like, I mean, what I wanted to do at that moment. So I just came out as an artist when I moved to the United States. So I always joking that I'm a Ukrainian curator and American artist. So yeah, and thanks you for this comment about irony. I was thinking a lot about the sources of this mentality of sacrifice, because we can, of course, speculate about this Orthodox mentality, Eastern Orthodox mentality, everything. But why sacrifice? Like here, Christianity in particular is not very fond of sacrifices. But somehow this idea of sacrifice in the cultural field, it gained a lot of importance. And that is like some, like, you know, some beam of paganism and shamanism and something very different even mental landscape, spiritual landscape than the landscape in which like Orthodox Christianity usually exists. So it's interesting. I don't know where it comes from, but I'm very curious.
All right. Do we have a candidate for the very last bit? No one? Oh, yes, please. Thank you.
Very short one.
That's what we need.
I'm an artist in New York. So the question is, how would you define the line between art that serves propaganda and political art?
It is a very complicated question. We can have another like probably 10-hour lecture or maybe a semester or maybe a year or maybe a lifetime exploring this topic. I really don't know what to tell you, because there are so many ways how we can like, you know, conceptualize it. If we are on the side of the artist that is being created, we always call it political art. If it is made by our enemy, we always call it propaganda. So it's like it's this very fishy terminology where it depends on your point of view. But I really, and everything is political. Human being is zoon politikon, as Aristotle once defined. So everything is political, and everything can be propaganda. Everything can be used for propaganda. As we know it, like Soviet culture is a bright example of that. Because, for instance, I am a fond, how to say it, believer, and I'm a follower of Ukrainian naive artists of the 20th century, Maria Primachenko, and even more so, Katerina Bilokur. Those were women who lived in villages, created art without like even being able to study at school, and the art was there like you know, from the depths of their heart. But the only reason why we know about them was because they were promoted by a Soviet propaganda machine as an alternative to the realities of Holodomor and mass famine in Ukraine in 1930s, to create an absolutely fake picture of prosperity in Ukrainian villages. So is it propaganda? Is it political art? Is it what is it? It is very complicated. But I think that like just being honest with yourself, and again, like believing in the power of art, I am a huge, like, that's why I'm saying that I'm partially a nun, because I believe in the power of art. And this is something that I lacked for many years in contemporary art world, because I was exposed so much to the hypocrisy and to practical things. And I met so many people who actually were creating art and didn't really believe in it. They believed in it as a means of material gain, but they didn't really believe that you can create an image and that image can change somebody's life. And it especially is difficult for us to understand this power of images because we live in the culture driven by Instagram, by our feed on our, how to say it, mobile devices. People like 200-300 years ago, no one ever even saw themselves. Even in the villages in Ukrainians, they barely had mirrors. You had to stare in the lake or somewhere to at least have some idea of how you go ask somebody else. So it's unthinkable for us today. And we are exposed to so many images that we are absolutely desensitized. But I still believe that the art was born from shamanism. Art is a shamanic practice. Art can transform. Art can bring a lot of change. And that's why people, like we see falling Lenins. Why were people revenging Lenin's monuments when they were enraged during the revolution? Because this is the image, this is the statue, this is like, we still are at some level cavemen who believe in it, who are afraid of it. And I knew even one person who kept a nose of Lenin in his office and was very proud of it. I mean, this is the power of image.
All right, that's a good take home. Thank you. That was absolutely perfect. And just to conclude, thank you again, Alisa, and many thanks to Jordan Center for sponsoring the event and bringing Alisa from California.
Thank you for bearing with me.
Yeah, beautiful. So follow Jordan Center Instagram and the website for more updates and more events. Thank you for coming.